Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Certificate Programs, Certificate in Nutrition and Child Care, CNCC-2 Organizing Child Care Services, Block-4 the Child, Development During Preschool Years. Unit-20 Social Relationships and Child Rearing. 20.1 Introduction. Before you read about the development of social relationships during the preschool years, you may like to recollect your experiences with preschoolers and consolidate your thoughts. In your interactions with them, what aspect of their social development struck you the most? How did you find them to be different from toddlers or older children in this regard? Write about these aspects in the space provided below. Perhaps you notice that the preschool heir is becoming independent. She takes initiative and, being more self-directed than the toddler, she is able to achieve more. Perhaps you notice that she interacts more with her peers. She likes to be with friends and cousins, and she plays with them cooperatively. You may have observed that she plays more pretend games compared to the toddler. You may, at times, have seen her reacting sensitively towards people in distress. Perhaps you felt that the child was growing more sure of herself, or more aggressive or more friendly than in the earlier years. And though you never actually taught her, you discover that she has some fairly strong ideas about how girls and boys ought to behave. During the preschool years, the child adds more dimensions to her personality and also develops behavior patterns, which will be fairly stable over time. Parents have a crucial role in shaping the child's personality in these formative years. It is the caregiver's socialization techniques and child-rearing practices that determine, to a large extent, how socially competent the child grows up to be. This unit will focus upon these aspects. As you are aware, this course deals with the development of children up to 6 years of age. However, in this unit we have, at certain places, traced the development of social skills beyond this period as well, in order to provide you a broader perspective. The sections about development in the later years of childhood have been enclosed in boxes. They are optional reading. You may read them if you are interested. Objectives. After reading this unit, you should be able to times explain the importance of fostering initiative in the preschool child and describe the behavior and attitudes of the caregivers that can help in this. Times describe the stages in the development of self-concept and state the factors that help in forming a self-concept. Times delineate the stages in the development of concept of gender and describe the role of the caregivers in promoting desirable social values and discouraging sex role stereotyping. Times compare the different ways of disciplining with reference to their effect on the child's personality. Times differentiate the various parenting styles and identify those best suited to raising children. Times identify the causes of aggression and explain how the parents can socialize the child's aggressive behavior. Times understand the nature of peer interactions in this age group. Times understand that the child shows more empathy and prosocial behavior during the preschool period. Times apply your understanding of this unit to everyday situations and interact with children. 20.2 Developing initiative. Preschoolers have many skills at their command and are able to plan their actions, which allow them to do more and to act effectively. Their greater confidence encourages them to take on challenges. Preschoolers like to take initiative. They will try to do the more difficult tasks, jump over a bush, put together a jigsaw puzzle, and venture into the park alone. They are eager to accept the guidance of adults and to learn to make plans for their activity. Now the caregiver can channelize the child's energy, enthusiasm, and initiative towards more specific goals. When the child meets with success in her initiatives, she develops confidence and a sense of self-esteem. But there is a problem when in her wish to do something, the child goes too far. For example, the 4-year-old, having started painting, not only paints all the papers given to her, but also her clothes and those of her infant brother sitting beside her. This may be clearly too much from the parent's point of view, and, in an attempt to teach the child the limits of her behavior, they may punish her or restrict her activity. When parents frequently punish the child, she may develop a sense of guilt. She may feel that her actions are always wrong and displeasing. When parents restrict her all the time, she loses initiative. She is then likely to do only what she is ordered to do, rather than choosing activities on her own. Such an attitude would be negative for the child development. Thus, the task of the caregivers at this stage is to help the child develop self-confidence and some responsibility for her actions without curbing her initiative. The child must learn to control those actions which are socially undesirable. Parents can help the child in this task by explaining why she must not do something, instead of merely restricting her. When there is balance between parental control and the initiative taken by children, then children are able to take pleasure in their abilities and are better able to take guidance from adults. But when this balance does not emerge, then the child's desires come in conflict with what others want her to do. Then, in an effort to avoid guilt and be accepted by others, which seems to be possible only by obeying them, she restricts and over-controls her behavior. She may begin to resent those who ask her to control herself. If this conflict is not resolved, the child may grow up to be one who does not take initiative and may also feel that the only way she can do what is right is to deny herself the things that she wants. To avoid such a situation, the caregivers need to be sensitive and must help the child cope with the conflicting feelings of initiative and guilt. 20.3 Self-concept. The toddler, you would remember, has acquired a sense of her physical self, i.e., the understanding that she is an individual. The next step in forming a concept of self is defining oneself in terms of one's physical characteristics, attitudes, beliefs, and personality traits. This process starts from the preschool years and continues throughout one's life. Let us read how the self-concept develops over the preschool years. Once the child becomes aware of herself, it is obvious that the first things she will notice are her physical characteristics. Thus, the process of defining oneself begins with noticing one's physical features. Preschoolers define themselves first in terms of gender, boy or girl, and observe how they appear, how tall they are, whether their hair is curly, and similar things. You may have noticed that even while describing objects, preschoolers state their outward appearance first. They are likely to say that this ball is red in color rather than saying that it is made of rubber. Similarly, the preschool child, in developing a self-concept, defines herself in terms of her visible characteristics. When asked to describe their own selves, preschoolers also say what they like to play with, where they live, and what they like. They describe themselves in terms of their frequent behavior or favorite action, such as can ride a tricycle. A striking aspect of children's self-concept at this age is that their descriptions of themselves are absolute. They refer to themselves as either big or small, old or young. They do not generally see themselves in relation to others, and so, while describing themselves, they do not use words like bigger or smaller, older or younger to somebody else. This is in keeping with the cognitive abilities about which you have read in the earlier unit. To give you an example of the self-concept of preschoolers, here is a self-description by one of them. He said the following sentences when asked to tell something about himself. Of course, he did not say all of this at once, but gradually with coaxing. My name is Ale. I have black eyes and black hair. I am 6 years old. Ilike to play with ball. I have brothers and sisters. I live in Narela. I go to school. I have many marbles. While playing and interacting with preschoolers, you could ask them questions which bring out what they think of themselves. You can use the following space to write a preschooler's description of herself himself. You may be interested in knowing how the concept of self develops over the later years of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. The further development in the concept of self has been described in Box 20.1. Box 20.1 Self-concept in later years. Over the years, the child's self-concept becomes more elaborate. As her thinking matures, she is able to think about herself. The older child focuses less on external characteristics and more on internal qualities. She refers to her feelings and thoughts while describing herself. Older children also begin to compare themselves with others, and they describe themselves using words like less smart, smarter than, and not so good as. The following self-description of a 10-year-old brings out these aspects. My name is Amla. I am a girl. I am tall. I can't draw as well as Anita. I get good marks in school. I like to play hopscotch. I have many friends. The adolescent questions the norms, beliefs, and attitudes of her society and grapples with ideologies and values. She thinks of these things and her views on these become a part of her self-concept. Over the years, one's self-concept becomes broader and many dimensions are added to it. The self-concept is not static, it changes as the person changes her opinions and beliefs. It would be interesting for you to write 10 or 15 sentences about yourself which you think describe you most closely. You could also ask your friend or a relative to tell you what he thinks of you. You may find that in some aspects what you think of yourself matches with what others think of you, and in others, your perception of yourself is different from theirs. 20.3.1 Origins of Self-Concept. How does one develop a self-concept? You read in Block 3 how the infant's explorations of her own body and interactions with others help her to develop a sense of physical self. These very factors help her to develop her self-concept during childhood years. Let us now read about this. As the child's abilities develop, she achieves a feeling of competence. She recounts her abilities saying, I can jump high, I can cross the road myself, I can get milk, I cannot ride a bicycle, or I can go to the market and buy vegetables. In this way she learns about herself, and these become a part of her concept of self. As she grows, her self-descriptions become more complex. Interaction with others is the second factor that influences the child's self-concept. During everyday activities, parents and others provide the child with information about herself. When the parents make any of the following kind of comments, why can't you ever write properly? You are clumsy, always dropping things, you are smart, we know you can do this work, or you are a good child and we like you. The child begins to believe these things about herself and makes them a part of her self-concept. When parents frequently give the child a positive feedback, the child develops a high self-esteem. When parents constantly give the child a negative evaluation of her abilities, the child's self-esteem will be low. Even when parents do not express their opinions, their beliefs about their child get conveyed to her through indirect and subtle ways. Parents who believe that the child is not competent are not likely to give the child much responsibility. Their behavior may lead the child to form the opinion, I am not competent to do anything. Then, in keeping with this belief about herself, she is likely to behave in ways that bring out her incompetence, thus reinforcing her low self-concept. While it is important to give the child a positive evaluation of herself, it is equally important that this feedback be a realistic picture of the child. False feedback which makes the child believe that she has skills and abilities which in truth she does not possess, may lead her to form an unrealistic opinion about herself. You would have interacted with children often and may also have played a major role in caregiving. Some of you may be parents. Reflect upon your interactions with children. What is the type of feedback you give them? Do you usually praise their good behavior or do you only give them a feedback about their incorrect behavior? Above all, is your feedback realistic? The next time you communicate with children, just make a mental note of the type of sentences you speak. If even for a day, you take care to see the type of feelings you convey to children, you will be able to assess your own behavior. You may like to note down a few comments about this here. To 0.3 to the concept of gender. As you know, the self-concept also includes one's concept of gender. Let us see how the concept of gender develops during the preschool years. You have read that by the end of toddlerhood, children can differentiate between men and women on the basis of their external features, like hair length and clothing. They will also be able to tell you whether they themselves are boys or girls. This means that they have acquired gender identity. But this does not mean that they have a complete understanding of the concept of gender. One of the things they may not know is that gender remains constant over time. They may believe that they, as well as others, can change their gender by wearing the clothes and doing activities of the opposite sex. Thus, the next step in developing the concept of gender is the realization that one stays the same gender. This is called gender constancy and is achieved around 4 or 5 years of age. Preschoolers realize that they stay the same gender before they realize that this is true for others as well. The constancy of gender is a little difficult for the preschooler to grasp, particularly since the child's other physical attributes and her appearance do change. This is not surprising after you have read about the preschooler's difficulty in conserving. Conservation, you know, involves the understanding that things remain the same even though they have changed externally in some manner. The same is involved in gender constancy. Thus, a complete understanding of gender develops around 5 or 6 years of age, when the child is a little less influenced by what she sees, be it the length of hair or the kind of clothes worn. Another aspect of the concept of gender is acquiring sex role behavior. This means understanding what is appropriate female and male behavior. In our society, the notions about these are fairly rigid and strong. Rigid ideas about what is masculine and what is feminine behavior are called sex role stereotypes. We think of men as competent, skillful, assertive, aggressive, ambitious, strong, and able to get things done. We think of women as warm, expressive, more aware of other people's feelings, caring, quiet, gentle, dependent, and submissive. However, with the changing values in society and with the spread of education, these stereotypes have weakened. Women are taking up occupations earlier considered to be male and are becoming more independent and self-reliant. But though the stereotypes are becoming blurred, they are nonetheless present and govern our behavior to a great extent. You would have often heard parents say to their crying son, "Boys don't cry," they buy different play materials for their daughters and sons. Children as young as 4 years begin to be influenced by these stereotypes. Let us see what ideas preschoolers have about men and women. 3 and 4-year-olds have a remarkable amount of information about the social expectations from the two sexes and have very definite ideas about what boys and girls ought to do. When asked, they may state that girls ought to play with dolls and dress up like women, and that boys ought to play with trucks and play at being drivers and pilots. By age 5, they also acquire stereotypes about personality traits and behavior. The older preschooler is more rigid in her notions of what is appropriate male and female behavior as compared to the younger preschooler. A study also brings out this point rather well. In this study of children between age 4 and 5, the researcher told them a story about a little boy who likes to play with dolls. In the story, the boy's parents tell him that only girls play with dolls and that boys should not. They buy him other toys, but the boy still plays with dolls. The children were then asked why the boy was told not to play with dolls and whether it was right told him so and what the boy in the story should do. 4-year-olds thought that it was acceptable for the boy to play with dolls, as there was no rule against it. But 6-year aides felt that it was wrong for the boy to play with them. As children grow beyond the preschool years, they continue to develop their notions of how males and females are expected to behave, but they become less rigid about the stereotypes. The 9 and 10-year-olds recognize more readily that one person can combine masculine and feminine behavior. They can accept it more easily if people do not display the stereotypical behavior expected of them. In the above story, for example, most 9-year-olds replied that boys usually do not play with dolls, but it was not wrong for the boy in the story to do so. One boy, for example, said, "You can play with dolls, but boys usually do not." An alternative to sex role stereotyping. It would be good if we were not rigid about correct male and female behavior but rather understood that masculine and feminine qualities are both necessary for every person and inculcate such an understanding in children. A woman may be interested in repairing cars and want to be assertive, traditionally defined as masculine traits in our society, and still feel herself to be no less a woman than any other. A boy who can be gentle and kind, traditionally seen as feminine qualities, will be better able to establish close relationships than one who is unemotional and dominant. It is desirable for a person to have both feminine and masculine qualities, to be compassionate and independent, gentle and assertive. There is nothing wrong in encouraging nurturance in boys and assertiveness in girls. It allows children a greater variety of roles, adding a richness to their personality. Our interactions with children must be guided with this in mind. When children raise questions about sex roles, we should discuss them. We may draw attention to individual differences among people, rather than only those based on gender. The aim behind such socialization is to help children reach their potential instead of being limited by traditional models. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU.
20.4 Child Rearing Practices. Sunil was playing with some marbles in the room. His 9-month-old brother was sitting on the bed playing with a doll. During his play, the doll fell down on the floor. The infant crawled to the edge of the bed and peered over to look at the doll. He started to whimper. Sunil, engrossed in his play, did not hear his brother. After some time, the infant started crying in earnest. Startled now, Sunil looked up from his play. On seeing the doll, he picked it up, handed it to the infant, patted him and played with him for a while. Sunil's mother, who had come in on hearing the child cry, had been observing this interaction from the door. When the infant had stopped crying, she came up to them, hugged Sunil, went to the infant and said playfully, "What happened?" "The doll fell down. See, Bhaiya is so good. He gave you your doll," and looked up to smile in appreciation at Sunil. Ramu was standing outside his house, watching a group of boys going to the village school. His attention was drawn towards a row of ants moving on the ground. He looked at them and then started stamping them. His elder brother, 15 years old, was returning from the market. Shocked to see Ramu doing this, he caught his arm and moved him away from the ants. He spoke angrily to him. "What are you doing? It is bad to kill anything. Don't do it ever again." In both these instances, the children are being brought up to show desirable social behavior. In the first instance, the mother places the child for helpful behavior, and, in the second, the brother scolds the child being cruel to living creatures. The children are being socialized. Socializations, as you know, is the process by which children acquire behaviors, skills, values, beliefs and standards that are characteristics, appropriate and desirable in their culture. Most parents have an idea about what their children should be like. These are the goals of socialization, and they vary from one culture to another and even from one family to another within a culture. The child acquires appropriate behavior through the direct teaching of parents, siblings, teachers, as well as indirectly as she watches people imitate their behavior. Behavior traits like altruism and respect for other people's rights are acquired in this manner. The socialization process begins from infancy, as you would have gathered from the earlier units. The child of the preschool age is more aware of herself, she is able to use speech and can comprehend events. She is now able to understand what is demanded of her. The parents now become more concerned about socializing her. While the parents, teachers, peers, radio, television and magazines influence the child's personality in significant ways, the family is the single most important factor that shapes the child. This is particularly true during the childhood years because the child spends a large part of her time with the family members. The values, beliefs and norms of the culture are imbibed through the family. In this section, we will concentrate upon the methods used by parents to socialize the child towards appropriate behavior and away from inappropriate behavior. These methods can be called the child rearing practices. Parents differ widely in the type of child rearing practices they use. It is particularly important to discuss these, since they influence the child's personality and attitudes. One of the major reasons for differences among the children is the socialization they have experienced. Certain types of family environments and experiences may be detrimental to the child, while some may enhance the child's potential. One aspect of the child rearing practices is the type of disciplinary techniques employed by parents. Another aspect is the parenting style. Let us first read about disciplinary techniques and their consequences in the following subsection. In the next subsection we will read about child parenting styles. 20th April 2001, Ways of disciplining. When a child does something which is unacceptable to the parents, they will try to stop that action. Broadly speaking, they respond in one of the following two ways. Some parents point out the consequences of the child's action to her, reason with her and appeal to her sense of responsibility and concern for others in order to prevent her from doing the same thing again. When disciplining the child, they are likely to say, "Don't hit Pinku. It hurts her." Or, "If you don't pick up your toys, I will have to do this later." Such statements draw the child's attention to the feelings and motives of other people, encourage her to reflect on her own behavior, help her to understand the rules and know the reasons for these rules. These parents are firm in their disciplining, yet they are affectionate and gentle with the child. They convey to the child that a certain action behavior is wrong without condemning the child. They say, "What you did was bad," instead of saying, "You are a bad girl." Such a method of disciplining is affection-oriented and is very effective in socializing the child. On the other hand, some parents mainly use commands to stop the child from a particular behavior. They say, "Don't do that, I tell you stop that at once," without giving the child a reason for why they want her to stop that behavior. In this case, the parents use their authority and power to discipline without reasoning with one's each child. They may also threaten the child and withhold privileges. "If you do not do this, I won't let you go to the park." They may also use physical punishment. This technique is the power-oriented technique of disciplining. Most of us use both the above-mentioned styles while disciplining children, as you will be able to say from your personal experience. When the child is doing something which may hurt her or others, most of us would resort to power-oriented disciplining, for there is no time to be lost in reasoning with the child. Sometimes no other method but power-oriented technique works. Even after repeated explanations, when the child does not stop the undesirable behavior, parents will resort to threats and reprimands. The age of the child also makes a difference. It is easier to reason with older children, while with the younger preschoolers, parents may need to use power assertion in more situations. Thus, the type of disciplining technique the parent employs is determined by the situation, the temperament of parent, and the child's own personality. But despite these, one can see that some parents primarily use affection-oriented disciplining, while others rely mainly on power assertion to socialize the child. The affection-oriented way of disciplining is more effective in socializing the child. It enhances the child's sense of moral values and behavior and promotes a sense of personal responsibility. The child accepts the parent's rules as her own and they become a part of her. The child feels guilt and shame when she does something undesirable. Such disciplining style fosters an attitude of being responsible for one's actions. The following research study will make the above discussion clear to you. In this study, 9 and 10-year-old children were first allowed to play with some attractive toys for about 10 minutes. Then they were told that these would be put aside and they would have to work with an uninteresting pulley mechanism. The children were then divided into 3 groups. One group of children were simply told, "Don't look at those toys again until I tell you." Here power-oriented technique was used to control behavior. With the second group of children a self-oriented technique was used, i.e., one that focused on children's own feelings. If you don't work hard on the pulley mechanism, you will have to do some of this work later and you will have little time to play with the good toys. The third group received affection-oriented disciplining, i.e., the one which focused on the feelings of another person. You will make me unhappy if you look at the toys now, and, if you don't work hard enough, I will have to do some of this work later and I will have little time to do what I want to do. It was seen that the latter group of children worked the hardest with the uninteresting toy and spent much less time gazing at the forbidden toys than the other 2 groups of children. Thus focusing on the other person's feelings and explaining the consequences was the most effective in persuading the children to do as told. Why is it that the affection-oriented technique has such positive and long-lasting consequences? One of the reasons is that when parents use this style of disciplining, they help the child to focus on the feelings of others and this evokes concern. They appeal to the child's emotions. Along with this, when the parents explain the rule, it gives the child information against which she can judge her own actions and use it to guide her future behavior. Ideally, the method of disciplining should be such that it leads the child to internalize the behavior. This is the ultimate test of good socialization. When a child acts good only when others are watching, she is doing so simply to please them or to avoid punishment. Of course, in the early years the factor that operates in the child's mind is, what will my mother teacher say when I do this? But as the child grows older, this reliance upon external factors to control one's behavior must shift to internal control, so that the child herself feels a desire to behave in acceptable ways. Before you read further, you might like to reflect upon your own behavior to see what type of technique you usually use with children. Do you use different techniques in different situations? Do you discipline a 5-year-old child in the same way as you discipline a 10-year-old? Or are there differences? Would you like to change your style of disciplining? You may like to write your thoughts in the space provided below. Punishment. We have spoken briefly about punishment in Block 3 as well as in the preceding paragraphs. You know by now that punishment can take different forms. Times physical punishment, slapping and spanking. Times verbal punishment, scolding, swearing, threatening. Times withholding material things like eatables, toys or clothes. Times withdrawal of love through ignoring, isolating or accusing the child of hurting one's feelings. Let us read in some more detail about this aspect of disciplining, as each one of us has widely different views on this. If punishment becomes a regular method of dealing with the child's misbehavior, then it can have many negative consequences, particularly when parents do not explain the reason for the punishment. Therefore, punishment must be used cautiously. One of the negative effects, about which you have read in the preceding section, is that the child fails to internalize the rules. Excessive punishment may give the child a feeling that she never does anything right, which is likely to lower her self-esteem. The child usually becomes less compliant with adults and peers. When punishment is used often, it leaves the child feeling resentful and angry with the parent. She may begin to avoid the parent. Severe punishment may generate so much anxiety in the child that she does not learn the intended lesson. These negative effects of punishment are increased if parents often use physical punishment. Besides, there is another undesirable long-lasting effect of physical punishment, and that is, parents who regularly use physical punishment serve as models of aggression. Watching adults use aggression, punishment, to control situations, the child too begins to behave aggressively. Many research studies have supported this fact. In one research study, preschoolers were shown videotapes of parent-child conflicts and asked what they would do if they were the parent. In reply, the children mentioned those methods of disciplining which their own parents used with them. It can be said that parents who use severe punishment are unknowingly training their children to use punishment-oriented techniques later on. It is possible that parents who use physical punishment were themselves disciplined in that way as children. From this discussion, what can we conclude about the role of punishment? Does it mean that one should never punish children? Whether punishing the child will lead to such negative consequences or not depends on how parents use punishment. If we use punishment in accordance with some principles, it can promote self-control without harming the child's personality. Let us study these principles. Punishments or prohibitions will have their greatest impact if the adult gives the reason for the punishment. Do you remember having read about this aspect in the earlier section on affection-oriented techniques? This is the most important aspect of disciplining. The explanation, however, must be at the child's level of understanding. Naturally, for the young child the explanation should be brief and specific. The timing of the punishment is important. Punishment is most effective when it immediately follows the misbehavior. The best time to stop an act is when it is just about to occur or as it is beginning. When the child snatches the toy for the first time, that is when the parent must step in, rather than waiting for the fifth time when the child does it. If this is done, the need for physical punishment will not arise. If there is no other choice but to delay the punishment, then later while punishing the child, the parent must state clearly why the child is being punished. An important aspect that determines how the child reacts to punishment by the parent is the emotional relationship they share. Punishment from a nurturant and affectionate parent is more likely to be effective than punishment from a cold and withdrawn or hostile parent. This is because when an affectionate parent punishes the child loses the parent's affection temporarily, which hurts her. So she stops the undesirable behavior in order to regain the parent's affection. On the other hand, when the parent is hostile and cold, the punishment is not something very different from the parent's usual behavior. So the child does not lose much emotionally when she gets punished and she makes little effort to correct her behavior. One must be consistent in disciplining. It should not be that one punishes the undesirable act one day, ignores it another day and praises it yet another day. Neither should the undesirable behavior be punished by one parent and let off by the other. This inconsistency in actions confuses the child and consequently, undesirable behavior persists. The punishment given for a certain action must be fair and mild. However, mild punishment may not always have an effect. While the punishment may be just moderate, it must not be severe because while that makes the child obedient, it also generates resentment and fear. One of the forms of punishment used by many parents is making the child sit by herself, away from others, for a short period of time. During this time, everybody ignores the child. After the punishment is over, everybody behaves normally with the child. The child must be given an explanation for the punishment. Such a method is not generally physically or emotionally harmful to the child. The child's role in punishment, it may seem strange if you have not thought about it, but the child's own personality and behavior influence the type of punishment she gets. It has been seen that children who are aggressive are punished more strictly than those who are not aggressive. Aggressive and non-aggressive children react differently to punishment, which in turn influences the parents' behavior. Non-aggressive children when punished stop the undesirable behavior, while aggressive children usually increase their undesirable behavior, particularly if the power-oriented technique is being used. Seeing the child defiant, the parents become more punitive. Thus a cycle is set up: the child misbehaves, the parent punishes her, the child defies the parent uses more punishment and the level of the child's aggression goes up. It becomes very difficult to break this chain of events. It seems as if parent and the child are caught in a trap. It remains then for parent to bring about a change in the situation. Thus, we saw that just as the parent's child-rearing practices influence the child's personality, the child's temperament influences the type of rearing practices of parents. A few more examples will make it clear how parents and children influence each other's behavior. A child who remains irritable for most of the time is likely to be frustrating to the parents. They may then react impatiently, which in turn increases the child's irritability. Parents who feel that their children are difficult, interact less with them and respond less sensitively to their cries than other parents. 20th April 2002, Styles of Parental Behavior. Disciplinary techniques are just one aspect of parent-child relationships. There are many other dimensions of parents' behavior that influence the child's personality. Each parent has a distinct parenting style. Some parents are loving and affectionate while some are hostile and rejecting, and yet others, indifferent. Some parents are firm about rules, some are lax and others are strict about them. There are many other aspects of parental behavior. By and large, the parenting style adopted by a parent is fairly stable over time and across situations. But this does not mean that the parent is inflexible. A parent who is usually strict about enforcing rules may, in some cases, allow the child considerable flexibility. The style of parenting has a long-lasting effect on the child's personality. Therefore, parents need to decide very carefully which parenting style they would like to adopt. It would be difficult to describe all the styles of parental behavior. For ease of discussion, we will group parents into 4 broad categories and see how each style influences the child's personality. Firm and affectionate parenting. These parents are warm, loving and supportive of the child's efforts and accomplishments. They often praise the child. They show enthusiasm in the child's activities, respond sensitively to her feelings, and show empathy and compassion. They usually put the child's needs over their own. They understand their child's personality characteristics and points of view. Such parents are firm in disciplining. They lay down simple rules and make it clear to the child that these have to be obeyed and what may be the consequences of disobeying. At the same time, they explain the reasons for the rules. In other words, they limit the child's behavior, but within these limits they encourage independence. They allow enough flexibility for the child to act independently within the rules. Before formulating rules and arriving at decisions, they often ask children about their views and encourage discussion. They listen to children's objections. Listening means more than nodding one's head when the child is speaking. It means considering what the child is saying and responding to it. This will give the child the feeling that she is saying something that is worthwhile and that her opinions are important. Such an atmosphere reflects a high level of warmth and a good communication between the parents and the child. The child feels that it is easy for her to express her true feelings to her parents.
Parents who demand and expect mature behavior from the child set high standards of achievement for her. But along with this, their demands from the child are reasonable and in keeping with her abilities. When the parents' expectations of the child are reasonable, the child is able to meet the parents' standards and derives a sense of competence from this. This feeling of confidence carries over to other situations. It is important to restate one point here. The key concept is realistic expectations. Unrealistic demands will lower the child's self-esteem as she can never fulfill them. Such a parenting style, affectionate, firm and yet flexible, fosters independence and self-reliance in children. Children show mature behavior earlier, have higher self-esteem, show more generosity, are sensitive towards others and are less aggressive. They are friendly and get along well with peers. They are more willing to try out new things and explore, a trait that is associated with creativity. They are more planful and perform better in school compared to other children. Rigid and inflexible parenting. The foremost characteristic of these parents is that they use very little reasoning to discipline the child. Rather, they use power-oriented techniques to inculcate desirable social behavior. They view themselves as those who are in authority. They set the rules and demand that the children obey them unquestioningly. They are rigid about the rules they have set. They do not communicate the reason for their rules and decisions to the child and do not encourage her to have a viewpoint. They value obedience and discourage independent behavior, questioning and exploration. They are highly controlling of the child's behavior. The child is not allowed to think and act on her own. These parents are also less warm and affectionate. They seldom praise the child. Some of them may even be openly hostile and rejecting. It has been seen that children belonging to such families are generally discontented, distrustful and withdrawn. They may also have difficulty in forming relations with peers and do not get along well with them. Since the children are seldom encouraged to try out things, they have a lower self-esteem compared to other children. In response to the parents' behavior, some of these children may become subdued and timid while others may react to the parents' behavior by showing a high level of aggression. As teenagers, these children do less well in school since they had no early opportunity to act spontaneously. Permissive parenting. These parents are lax in disciplining. They give children all the freedom to do as they want. There are almost no rules for children and the parents do not expect much from them. In fact, children tend to make their own rules. Parents rarely demand that the child behave in a mature manner. Children in these families have the freedom to do as they want and have few responsibilities. Parents express their warmth and love to the children liberally.
Children of such parents have been found to be the least mature or self-reliant. They are not likely to take on responsibility and may be immature in their behavior with peers. They are not independent and they show high levels of aggression, since the parents do not make efforts to control the child's aggression. Neglect in parenting. These are parents who neglect their children. They are not interested in their children and do not bother about them. They do not show much warmth and love. They do not control the child's behavior or expect mature behavior. This sort of parenting style is associated with the most negative influence on children's personality. Children of such parents show disturbances in their relationship with peers, both in childhood and adulthood. They lack social skills of relating to others and do not display leadership skills. In fact, they may show antisocial behavior in adolescence and adulthood. They are also not highly motivated to achieve and do not try hard for success. While we have stated that a particular parenting style leads to certain specific personality characteristics in children, it must be remembered that we have only mentioned generalities. The outcomes we have described with each parenting style are the mostly likely outcomes, but they are not 111 ones. The behavior of the parents is just one of the many factors. 11 at 1 affects 111 each child's behavior. The child is also influenced by people she meets outside the family. If the parents are hostile but others are supportive and warm, the child's personality may develop positively. It is also possible that each of the parents uses a different parenting style. If one of the parents is restrictive and the other is flexible, it will have a different impact on the child than when both the parents are restrictive. 20.5 Providing nurturance and fostering independence. You know that as the child grows, she is able to do many tasks by herself. The preschooler is no longer as dependent on the parents as the toddler. As she enters the middle childhood years and adolescence, she will become more independent. It is important to encourage the child's desire to do things on her own because this promotes self-confidence. This is also related to how the child deals with situations in life and to what extent she believes that she has control over things. How independent a child will be in the childhood years, and later in adulthood, depends upon how the parents handle the child's early dependency. Parents want to protect their children as well as prepare them to face danger and frustration. One of the greatest challenges of parenting is achieving a balance between too much and too little protectiveness towards children. Let us read about this briefly. Dependent behavior of children takes two forms. Affection seeking. Children want to be loved. When they are praised and noticed, they feel loved. When the child says, "Look at me," she is expressing a desire to be praised and reassured of the parent's love. Help seeking. When faced with a task that the child finds difficult, she asks for help. Besides enabling her to do the task, the adult's help also reassures her that they care for her. How should the parents respond to the preschooler's dependent behavior? It may seem paradoxical, but when the parents respond to the child's dependent behavior positively, it makes the child grow up to be more independent than when they punish her for dependent behavior. A child who asks for affection and gets it from the parents is likely to grow up to be an emotionally secure, independent adult. To put it in other words, children who are not provided nurturance when they need it, may continue to seek it as they grow older. As adults, they may feel emotionally insecure, and this can lead to dependent behavior and excessive reliance on others. If the major factor in one's relationships as an adult is the need for love and security, then it can be very handicapping. It can curtail independent functioning to a great extent. An example from preschool years will make this clear. The child who clings to the parents when they leave her at the preschool and does not let them go is likely to be the one whose dependent behavior has not been sufficiently responded to by the parents. So she finds it difficult to be separated from the parents for some time each day. In the school, this child may seek excessive attention from the teachers. On the other hand, The child who adjusts to the new school environment without much of a problem and makes friends is the one whose parents have provided nurturance. She is thus able to act independently. On the earlier extreme are overly protective parents who encourage dependent behavior and respond anxiously when the child asks for help, instead of encouraging her to try herself. They can make the child anxious as well. The child then does not learn ways of handling problems on her own and, as an adult, may rely excessively on others. How can one foster independence in the child? It is often a case of each parent finding a balance between indulging the child and being firm, and between helping the child at the slightest difficulty and asking her to do everything on her own. 20.6 Relationship with siblings. Most families in our country have more than one child. Interacting with siblings is as much a part of the child's life as interacting with parents. In fact, in many families where the older child looks after the younger ones when the parents go out to work, more time is spent with siblings than with parents. Siblings thus are significant agents of socialization. There is one marked difference in the child's relationship with siblings as compared to her relationship with her parents. Can you think what it may be? Siblings are nearer in age to each other, and child relationship between them is more equal, friendly and democratic than with parents. Howsoever flexible and child-centered parents may be, they are still perceived as authority figures by the child.